It's very difficult to know where to even begin with Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey. Overall, the biggest issue is that the storytelling here was largely just a hot mess and boring. And you guys that have been watching my channel for many years know that we cover the business and financial side of Hollywood and the entertainment industry. And very rarely do I get on here and actually do a review of a movie. But given the nature of this and the scale of the marketing campaign and, of course, all the hype for the Odyssey, I felt like I'm going to go sit through this one, even though I really did not have a ton of interest to do so. I've told you many times before, having seen the initial trailers for this movie, there was a lot about it that kind of turned me off. I'm a big fan of classical literature and, of course, major historical fantasy epics, Lord of the Rings and whatnot. Peter Jackson did an amazing job. And what I can tell you about the Odyssey is that watching this movie felt like Chris Nolan trying to have his Peter Jackson moment, but he dumbed it down about 100 IQ points for the modern audience, as he put it. It showed. Now, I'm not going to go point by point through this film and every single thing that's wrong with it from a narrative or story perspective, other than to say that I left this theater very, very disappointed. The audience at the end of this PLF screening that was mostly packed out, and I will note that the standard screenings were largely empty. This is a very, very heavily IMAX and PLF weighted financial performance this weekend at its opening, which means that the box office is going to be somewhat deceptive in terms of the number of butts in seats, because it is enjoying so much of a heavy weight towards PLF that it's going to skew some of the numbers. And I don't think the masses are going to see this in quite the fashion that's going to be presented in the major Hollywood media because of that. Now, as we always say, the second weekend is going to tell the tale to see where this goes from here. And of course, Spider-Man comes out in 2 weeks, and that's going to consume a lot of the oxygen, if not all of the oxygen in the room. As far as this movie goes, the most egregiously offensive things of it, apart from things that have been talked about online with the bad casting choices, the decision to use a very modernistic, feminist version of the translation of Homer's The Odyssey, which certainly shows in this film. The sound design of this is terrible. It is exhausting. I don't know if I've ever walked out of a theater in my life feeling absolutely just fatigued as I did at the end of this. An hour into this film, I'm begging for it to be over. Yes, the reactions from Chris Gore and Alan Ng were once again spot on. This is a movie that was not built to really entertain audiences, I think, so much as it was to entertain Christopher Nolan himself and the legacy Hollywood access media and the professional critic class, which of course are going gaga over this, but I seem to doubt that general audiences will feel the same way once the hype that's driving them into the theaters this weekend, which I think is largely misleading, will die down. This is not a movie I could ever recommend that anybody sit through once in the theater, let alone a second time. Specifically on the sound design, as I mentioned before, this was orally offensive. The entire movie, well, it doesn't have a score. People are talking about the score for this film. There is no score. There is a constant, thunderous refrain of drums that will punch holes in your ears, that is sitting just above a constant, rumbling, loud bass track for the entire film. It is obnoxious and fatiguing. Half the dialogue you can't even understand because the sound mix is weighted so heavily towards this ridiculous soundtrack beneath it. And the worst part about this soundtrack is when you actually do get to scenes that should have some dynamic emotional impact, they are left flattened because you have just spent the last 30 minutes to an hour listening to the same thundering in your ears. It is a very, very flat, monotoned movie. The color grading, even the brightness in the too many scenes that are just too dark and feel too cramped. There is no fantasy dynamic to this. If you want to know how to make a movie like the Odyssey, then look to Peter Jackson in Lord of the Rings. Unfortunately for the audiences, Christopher Nolan did none of this, and instead went his own direction, which of course I do understand, to each his own artistic direction. But at the end of the day, as we do here on Valiant Renegade, the Hollywood business is a business. And they're not in the movie-making business. They're in the money-making business just like everybody else. Movies and television happen to be their product. They're fair to make the money. And I don't think that this movie is going to bring home the bacon. We have a $250 million production budget that we are aware of, and that is, of course, allegedly net of any tax credits they would have received. Variety magazine suggests that the marketing spend for this movie is $125 million, which I've stated I find very difficult to believe, considering the Walt Disney Company just spent $145 million for Moana. Tell me that the 7 major city world tour with this entire hyper-expensive cast of the Odyssey was a paltry couple of $1 million to do. It wasn't. It was probably a couple of $1 million every stop they made. And that's before they bought a single ad on Google, on YouTube, on television, or streaming. This movie will exhaust you. It will absolutely exhaust you. I don't know if in my entire life, I've recommended to people, wait for something to come on streaming. And then when it does, make sure you have the dynamic volume limiter or night mode engaged on your television or your home theater system. Because otherwise, your brain and your ears will be begging for mercy within 30 minutes. This movie could have been great, and it had some great moments in it. Let me not miss that point. I think the last 30 minutes of the film were pretty darn good, or at least they could have been pretty darn good. The problem was the 2.5 hours or so preceding that final act were so exhausting that by the time you got there, it fell flat. I'll talk more about it on the Sunday show, but that's my thoughts for now. If you're going to see the Odyssey this weekend, God bless you. Good luck. And I'm sorry.